This week's been a very exciting week on the tiny house project. On Monday, the skylights arrived, which is great. However, I stupidly told the delivery driver to lower the skylights into the center of the gates. Now, this normally would be okay, except for the fact that I have 15 sheets of marine grade plywood arriving and 7 lengths of 6x2, meaning that I have now got to move these 4 skylights, which honestly is probably the heaviest pallet that I have ever had to try and move. I don't know how much this weighs, but I reckon it's a good 80 kilograms per skylight, and it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to move, even though I only managed to move it a meter. A few hours later, the marine grade plywood arrived. Now that is 18mm marine grade plywood. Now, if you don't know what that means, well, it is plywood that is worth its weight in gold. That is 122 quid per sheet. Disgusting. And this just shows the importance of calling up and haggling and just saying, hi mate, what is the best price you can give me on this, because I need to order 15 sheets of this, and currently that is showing as 1,839 quid, and that is making me feel incredibly unwell. And remember, it was 122 quid a sheet. What I ended up paying was 51 quid, so that's a little bit less than 50% off just by asking what is the best price you can give me. And that is why I always ask for the best price and haggle, because it is honestly the quickest way to make money. Seriously, is just to reduce how much money you spend. It's so simple and so obvious, but it's amazing to me how many people don't do it. Now, this is a very rare sight, seeing me tidy up a building site, but honestly, it does get to a point where you're tripping over stuff that you just got to spend 30 minutes to an hour sorting everything out. And I also use this time to try and plan and think ahead of the next works that I'm going to be doing on the project. For example, as you can see, I'm moving all of the timber to the left-hand side of the tiny house. Now, the reason for doing that is so that I can lay an entire row of flooring on the right-hand side of the tiny house using that marine grade plywood. And once that's all screwed down, I can then move all of this 4x2 onto the right hand side of the tiny house and then continue laying the flooring on the left hand side. You've always got to be a couple steps ahead when you're doing a project, because otherwise, trust me, you can end up moving things 650 times on a project. I mean, on the London project, my brother and me must have moved the porcelanosa tiles about 65 times because we kept putting them in the wrong place. So just spend a little bit of time future-proofing where you're moving stuff. Also, exciting times, there are now lights on in the tiny house, which is meaning that from the 4:30 that it gets dark, I can work until 6 p.m. Now, every area has different times in which you can make noise on your house. It's usually, in general terms, between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays, and then it changes a little bit on the weekends depending on what borough in London you're in, or national park district throughout England. Wherever you are, just Google it. It's very simple to figure out. And one thing that I highly recommend is just think, what sort of neighbour would you like to be next to? So don't be the neighbour who's using a chop saw at 7:30 at night. Don't be using an impact driver or knocking down walls or any of that stuff late. Do that stuff when you're allowed to make noise, but by all means continue working on it into the night if it's silent. And if you ever need to use an impact driver late at night, just put the bit into a drill and then it's just completely silent. That is how I was able to work until 1 a.m. on the London project, because, well, the neighbours had no idea that I was working on the house, because quite a lot of it is completely silent. If you are new to the channel, you might be wondering what I am doing buying skylights and putting them in as windows, and I would love to have an actual answer of why I'm doing it. I just think it will look sick, and I don't understand why people don't do it. Now, I've spent a lot of time on Google trying to look for YouTube videos of people doing it, and it seems to be something no one really does, and there might be a reason for this, but I'm going to figure it out, and you lot can learn from my either success or failure. And the first step when installing a skylight is to create an upstand. If you don't know what an upstand is, it's just a rectangle that the surround of a skylight sits on. My brother's come up with a new term for what I'm going to be doing, and it's no longer an upstand, it is an outstand, because it's an upstand that is now put vertical and it's going to stick out from the house. Now what I'm going to be using to create this outstand is 6x2. The reason I picked 6x2 was so that it sticks out 2 inches further than the stud wall. And this is where things get a little bit messy, and it kind of really does depend on the detail of whatever wall system that you've got going on. So as a quick recap, walls are usually made out of 4x2. Studs are the vertical piece of timber. You've got a ceiling plate and a floor plate. They're the bits of wood that the studs go in between. In order to install an outstand for the skylight to sit in to form this weird type of window that I'm going to be making, the opening in the stud wall needs to be wide enough for not only the skylight, but you've also got to remember that outstand that you're making. Now, it's not just that. The reason why is when making an upstand for a skylight, you need to add 5mm to each edge. So just the internal distance plus 1 centimeter. The reason why you do this is, I don't know, it's just the rule. I guess it's kind of for expansion or some words that mean something to do with science, but I don't know. It's just what you do. So I've done that. And this is where the detail of your wall is really important. Now, if you don't know what detail means, it's just kind of like, what are the ingredients of your wall? What is making it up? For example, for me, I have got 4x2. Then I have got OSB. After the OSB, there is Tyvek house wrap. It's a breathable membrane to let the moisture out, but prevent any moisture coming back into the house through the walls. Now, on top of that, I'm going to have batten. If you don't know what batten is, it's just 2x1. The depth of it is 1 inch. The batten is then used to fix the cladding system. Now, I don't really know what sort of cladding system I am going to use. I think I do. I think it's going to be some form of cedar. And for that, I have put a maximum width as being 20mm. So you can quickly see how the wall buildup, which started off as a 4x2 stud wall, has now actually got pretty wide. And the importance of this is that outstand needs to stick out past that in order for the skylight to sit in front of the cladding system that I'm going to be going with. So that's why it's crucial to get these measurements all correct. Now, there's something else you've also got to consider when setting where to put the outstand, and that is if you're going to angle the skylight at all. Now, I've decided to lean the skylight a little bit backwards. I don't actually know what degree I set it to, but I do know the measurements, and that is on the floor plate to the back of the outstand is 3 centimeters. At the top, I set that as being 2 centimeters. Now, I just need to make sure I don't forget that. Depending on what skylights you've got, this could cause a little bit of trouble, because obviously on a skylight, you've got the internal structure of a skylight, the double glazed part of it, and then you've got that really nice surround part of it. Now, that surround on this one has got an overhang of 10 centimeters on each end. So that makes a 2-meter skylight actually 2 meters 20. Now, you've really got to always remember the measurements of your skylight, because obviously if you're angling a skylight, well, then that top overhang could actually end up hitting into whatever cladding system that you're going for. So just always bear that in mind. Think of the knock-on effects. Think, how on earth am I going to mess this up? And how can this action that I'm doing right now be bad in the future? Also, bad news, I'm going to have to install these skylights on my own, because everyone I know is unavailable, and at the time of recording this, I have installed one of them, and let me just tell you, my vertebrae in my spine don't exist anymore. I have no back, and the weight that I said earlier of how heavy they are, completely wrong. They are heavier than the entire tiny house with my car put on top of it. One thing that is extremely annoying is whoever was in charge of putting the pallet together was an absolute puppet, and they ended up putting a screw straight through one of the skylights and fracturing the entire corner piece of it. Now, it doesn't look that bad on camera, but because this is all tempered glass, when there's a change of temperature or something else going on, because it's already got a fracture, it could make the entire skylight shatter into a million pieces, which is obviously not what I want. So I've had to email the skylight company, and they're going to send me a brand new one, because this skylight, there is no way you can fix this. Is there a way you can fix it, actually? That is my question to you lot. Also, thanks to every single one of you who gave feedback on my DIY. Put simply, I spent Genuinely hours writing that and trying to make it super simple and clear to understand, because when you're trying to break down an entire thing like tiling, it's very simple, but it's actually quite hard to explain, and I think I managed to do a pretty all right job of it. If you haven't already, there's a link in the description. Sign up now. Every single week I am showing you everything to do with my world, how it all works, developing, creating the setup to actually leave your 9-to-5 job. I also send out houses that are of interest. And also thanks to everybody who's just supporting the channel in general, liking the videos, subscribing. I cannot really believe the response lately. It's been amazing. So thanks a lot. And as always, I will see you next Thursday.